We already know that there are deep shafts like the Osiris shaft. The bottom of the Great Pyramid, the subterranean chamber, is 100 feet vertically beneath the base of the Great Pyramid.
The Great Pyramid has stood for thousands of years. Scientists thought they knew everything about it. They were wrong. Deep beneath the stone lies a hidden chamber unknown to history yet. What if the pyramid was never a tomb? What if it was built to hide something far more terrifying? Join us as we descend into the mystery that's rewriting human history. A scan that changed everything. The team arrived at Giza with equipment designed for routine geological surveys, the kind of work that gets done every few years to monitor structural stability, check for water damage, assess how the desert climate affects the ancient stones. Nothing about this project suggested it would find anything unusual. The Great Pyramid had been scanned, studied, and measured more than any other structure on Earth. Every stone documented, every chamber mapped, every theory about its construction debated for centuries. But science improves, technology gets sharper, and sometimes seeing the same thing with better tools reveals what was always there but invisible. The thermal imaging began along the north face, scanning the limestone blocks for temperature variations that might indicate internal damage or moisture seepage. Standard procedure for ancient monuments, looking for problems before they become catastrophic. Then the readings stopped making sense. There were heat signatures coming from deep within the foundation. Not surface heat from the sun warming the stone during the day, but consistent warmth radiating from somewhere far below, somewhere that should have been cold, dark, and geologically inert for thousands of years. Sealed limestone does not generate heat, it absorbs it slowly during the day and releases it gradually at night, creating predictable thermal patterns that archaeologists and geologists know by heart. But these signatures were different. They were steady, localized, and coming from areas where no known chambers existed. Places that, according to every map and survey, should be solid bedrock. The team ran the scans again, checked the equipment for malfunctions, recalibrated the sensors, and the results came back identical. Something beneath the pyramid was producing thermal energy, whose patterns did not match sunlight absorption. Not geological, because the bedrock in this region is thermally stable. Not modern, because there are no pipes, wires, or infrastructure anywhere near the detected source. The moment the team realized the heat was not coming from any known process, the project stopped being routine and became something else entirely. An investigation into something that should not exist, and the deeper they looked, the more unsettling the data became. Because the heat was not random, it was organized, pulsing in rhythms that suggested regulation rather than decay, which meant something beneath the pyramid was still active, and had been for a very long time. The subterranean chamber was not the bottom. Every archaeology student learns about the three main spaces inside the Great Pyramid: the King's Chamber high up in the center, the Queen's Chamber lower down, and the subterranean chamber carved into the bedrock far below the base. The subterranean chamber has always been treated as an afterthought, a rough, unfinished pit that the builders supposedly abandoned early in construction, too crude and unstable to serve as a proper burial site, so they changed plans and built upward instead. For over a century, archaeologists assumed that chamber was the lowest point of the pyramid, the absolute bottom, nothing but solid rock beneath it stretching down into the plateau. But assumptions are only safe until better technology proves them wrong. When the team deployed muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to map density variations inside massive structures, they were expecting to confirm what everyone already knew: solid stone, empty chambers. Nothing surprising. Instead, the scans revealed low-density voids beneath the subterranean chamber, spaces where stone should be dense and unbroken, but instead showed as hollow, organized, and structured in ways that natural erosion does not create. These were not cracks or collapsed tunnels. They were deliberate spaces, carved or formed with intention, existing below what was supposed to be the pyramid's foundation. The realization sent a cold shock through the research community, because if the subterranean chamber was not the bottom, then everything built above it takes on a different meaning. It was not the foundation of the pyramid, it was a lid. Why would ancient builders go to such lengths to carve chambers deep into bedrock, and then build the most precise megalithic structure in history directly on top of them, unless they were not building a tomb but sealing something that was already there? The muon data showed passages descending even further, angles and alignments that matched the pyramid's geometry, as if whatever was below had dictated the design of what was built above. And the deeper the scans went, the stranger the readings became, because the voids were not empty. They were filled with something that absorbed muons differently than air, water, or stone, something dense but not solid, reflective but not metallic, something that should not exist beneath a 4,000-year-old monument. And the most disturbing part was that the deeper chambers were not cold and dead like the rest of the bedrock. They were warm, rhythms in the rock. The thermal anomalies were strange enough on their own, but when the team installed continuous monitoring sensors, they discovered something far more unsettling. The heat was not constant, it was cycling. Every 12 hours, the temperature in the deepest voids would rise slightly and then fall. A pattern so regular it could be measured to the minute, and this rhythm had nothing to do with day and night. It was synchronized with something else entirely: the rotation of Earth's magnetic field. At first, the researchers thought this had to be coincidence. Rocks do not respond to magnetic fields in ways that produce heat, but when they cross-referenced the data with geomagnetic observatories around the world, the correlation was undeniable. Every time Earth's magnetic field shifted during its natural daily cycle, the chambers beneath the pyramid responded, and the response was not random. It was predictable, mechanical, as if the structure was tuned to react to specific frequencies. This kind of behavior exists in nature. Certain crystals and minerals exhibit piezoelectric properties, meaning they generate electrical charge when subjected to mechanical stress or magnetic fluctuation. Quartz does this, so does granite under the right conditions. But the bedrock beneath Giza is limestone, which is not piezoelectric, and even if it were, natural piezoelectric responses do not produce organized thermal cycles. They produce scattered electrical potential that dissipates almost immediately. What the sensors were detecting was something far more sophisticated. The pyramid was not generating random static. It was functioning like a passive receiver, absorbing energy from Earth's magnetic field and channeling it downward into the voids below. The implications of this were staggering, because if the pyramid was designed to interact with planetary magnetic rhythms, then it was not built as a tomb, it was built as a machine, or more accurately, as part of a system that predated any known Egyptian technology. Engineers began modeling the structure based on the sensor data, tracing energy pathways through the stone, and what they found matched the internal geometry almost perfectly. The Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, the descending passages, all of them aligned in ways that would focus and direct electromagnetic energy downward. The pyramid was not pointing toward the stars, it was pointing into the ground, and whatever it was pointing at was still responding after thousands of years. Which raised a question nobody wanted to ask out loud. If the pyramid was designed to regulate or suppress something beneath it, what happens if that regulation fails? And more importantly, what would happen if someone tried to dig down and find out what it was protecting? Evidence of energy, not burial. When archaeologists finally gained permission to drill narrow exploratory shafts into the lower voids, they expected to find empty space, perhaps ancient tool marks, maybe evidence of why the chambers were abandoned. What they brought back instead were samples that should not exist in a tomb. The stone around the deepest chambers was not just warm, it was scorched, blackened in places as if exposed to extreme heat, far beyond anything that torches or oil lamps could produce. The kind of thermal damage that requires sustained high-temperature exposure. But more disturbing than the scorch marks was the magnetism. Fragments of limestone retrieved from the lowest accessible level were strongly magnetic, which limestone should never be, because limestone is a sedimentary rock made from compressed calcium carbonate and ancient marine organisms, none of which contain magnetic minerals. Yet the samples pulled from beneath the pyramid registered magnetic fields strong enough to deflect compass needles. Something had fundamentally altered the molecular structure of the stone, and that alteration was not natural. Mixed within the samples were particles that did not belong, microscopic fragments of a crystalline material that was not native to Egypt, not matching any known mineral deposits in the region, and under electron microscopy, the particles showed geometric lattice structures too uniform to be naturally occurring. These were not gemstones or decorative inlays, they were embedded in the rock itself, fused into the limestone as if they had been molten and then rapidly cooled, and their distribution pattern suggested they had originated from deeper down, not brought in from above. The lab analysis revealed something even stranger. The crystalline particles were still faintly radioactive, not dangerously so, but measurably above background radiation, and the decay rate suggested the exposure event had happened thousands of years ago, possibly tens of thousands. This was not evidence of a burial chamber. It was evidence of an energy event, something that had released enough heat and electromagnetic force to permanently alter the geology around it, and the pyramid had been built directly on top of the blast site. No known Egyptian technology could produce these effects. Bronze Age tools and copper chisels do not generate magnetic fields, oil lamps do not scorch limestone, and ancient tomb builders do not work with radioactive crystalline materials. The evidence pointed to something else, something the Egyptians had discovered rather than created, something they had found already embedded in the plateau, and decided the safest response was not to remove it, but to bury it under the largest structure humanity could build. Which meant the pyramid was not a monument to a king, it was a containment protocol, the geometry that points downward. Architects have studied the Great Pyramid's internal geometry for centuries, marveling at the precision of the Grand Gallery, the mathematical relationships between chambers, the alignment with cardinal directions accurate to within fractions of a degree. But most analysis focused on what the geometry pointed toward: the stars, the horizon, celestial events, treating the pyramid as something designed to reach upward toward the heavens. The new data forced researchers to flip that assumption completely. When engineers mapped the energy pathways detected by the sensors and overlaid them onto the pyramid's structural blueprint, a pattern emerged that had been invisible until now. Every major internal feature was aligned not to project outward, but to focus inward and downward. The Grand Gallery, long thought to be a ceremonial ascending passage, was angled in a way that would channel electromagnetic energy downward. If the structure was functioning as a waveguide, its corbelled walls creating a resonance chamber that amplified specific frequencies. The King's Chamber, positioned at the pyramid's center of mass, sat directly above the deepest detected void, connected by a vertical line so precise that modern laser measurements showed less than 2 centimeters of deviation across over 60 meters of solid stone. Even the so-called air shafts, narrow channels that Egyptologists believed were symbolic passageways for the pharaoh's soul, aligned perfectly with the magnetic pathways running through the bedrock, as if they were not ventilation at all, but conduits. Computer models built from the sensor data showed energy moving through the pyramid like water through a dam, entering from the atmosphere and Earth's magnetic field, flowing through the internal chambers, and concentrating in a focused beam aimed directly at the spherical anomaly detected far below. The pyramid was not radiating power. It was absorbing and directing it, functioning as a massive regulator or dampening system. And the more energy the models absorbed, the more stable the readings from the underground structure became. This was not architecture designed for worship or burial. This was engineering designed for containment. Every angle, every chamber, every ton of limestone placed with the intention of creating a stabilizing shell around something that needed to be controlled. And if the pyramid was a shell, then whatever it was built to contain was still inside, still active, still responding to the same forces it had responded to for thousands of years. The Egyptians had not built a tomb, they had built a prison, and the thing inside was still alive. The discovery beneath the bedrock. The decision to scan deeper was controversial. Many archaeologists argued it was too invasive, too risky, that some questions should remain unanswered, out of respect for the site's historical significance. But the data was too compelling to ignore, and funding came from sources less concerned with preserving mystery than with understanding what was actually down there. Deep penetrating synthetic aperture radar was deployed across the entire Giza plateau, technology originally developed for mining surveys and military applications, capable of mapping subsurface structures down to depths of several hundred meters. The scans took weeks to complete and months to process. When the final images were rendered, the team sat in silence, because what the radar revealed was impossible to reconcile with natural geology or ancient construction. Far beneath the pyramid, deeper than the known chambers, deeper than the bedrock itself, there was a sphere, a perfectly spherical structure, approximately 30 meters in diameter, suspended in a cavity that showed no tool marks, no excavation scars, no evidence of how it got there. Its surface reflected radar signals in a way that stone does not. The return signature was sharp, uniform, and highly reflective, similar to polished metal or engineered crystal, materials that should not exist at that depth, in that time period, in any historical context. The sphere's position was not random. It sat directly beneath the pyramid's apex, aligned with the vertical energy channel that ran through the King's Chamber and the subterranean chamber, as if the entire pyramid had been built around this singular focal point. Geological surveys of the surrounding rock showed something even more disturbing. The cavity containing the sphere was older than the pyramid, older than dynastic Egypt, older than any known human civilization in the region. Carbon dating of organic material trapped in fractures near the cavity suggested the space had been sealed for at least 12,000 years, possibly much longer, meaning the sphere had been buried in the plateau long before the first pharaohs, long before the first cities, long before recorded history. The Egyptians had not placed it there. They had found it, and their response had been to build the most enduring structure in human history directly on top of it. But why build a pyramid over something unless you needed to keep it contained? And what kind of object remains intact and functional after sitting underground for over 10,000 years? The pulse that should not exist. The magnetic sensors had been running for 3 weeks straight. They were positioned in a grid pattern around the pyramid, each one recording data every single second. The scientists expected background noise, maybe some interference from the city. What they got instead made absolutely no sense at all. There was a pulse. It repeated every 11 seconds, 11.3 seconds to be exact, over and over and over, day and night. It never stopped. It never changed rhythm. It never missed a beat. At first, the team thought their equipment was broken. They replaced the sensors. The pulse continued. They brought in new machines from 3 different countries. All of them detected the same thing, a rhythmic magnetic fluctuation coming from deep beneath the pyramid. Not from the chambers inside it, from below the bedrock itself. The lead geophysicist described it as similar to a heartbeat, not metaphorically. Literally, the pattern matched the way a biological heart contracts and releases. There was a rise in magnetic intensity, a peak, then a fall, then a rest period. Then it started again. The waveform looked identical to an electrocardiogram reading. But this was not a living thing. It could not be. The pulse was coming from hundreds of feet underground, from inside solid rock, from a location where nothing biological could possibly survive. There was no oxygen down there, no water, no organic material of any kind. Then something even stranger happened. One night, a powerful solar storm hit Earth. Magnetic disturbances rippled across the planet. Compasses went haywire. Radio signals failed. Satellites temporarily lost communication. And the pulse beneath the pyramid changed. For 6 hours, it sped up. The 11-second interval dropped to 9 seconds. The intensity doubled. The sensors nearly overloaded from the strength of the signal. Then, as the solar storm faded, the pulse slowly returned to its normal rhythm, like a heart rate returning to baseline after exercise. The object was responding to external energy. The team ran tests. They set up electromagnetic field generators on the surface, small ones at first. When they powered them on, the pulse changed again, subtle shifts in timing, small increases in strength. It was adapting, reacting, almost like it was aware of what was happening above it. One scientist suggested they were witnessing a feedback loop. The object was not just emitting energy, it was receiving it, processing it, and sending something back, like a conversation conducted in magnetic pulses instead of words. They shut down the generators immediately, but the damage was done. Now, they knew the truth. Whatever was buried beneath the Great Pyramid was not a rock. It was not a fossil. It was not some ancient relic slowly decaying in the dark. It was active. It was listening, and it had been doing so for thousands of years. The builders did not create it. The dating results came back on a Thursday morning. Nobody spoke for almost an hour. People just stared at the papers, at the numbers, at the impossible timeline now sitting in front of them. The melted limestone samples taken from around the spherical object were impossibly old. The crystalline structure showed heat damage that occurred approximately 32,000 years ago. That date was not a guess. It was not an estimate. 3 separate laboratories in 3 different countries confirmed it independently using different dating methods. 32,000 years. The Great Pyramid was built around 4,500 years ago. Everyone agreed on that. The historical records were clear. The archaeological evidence was overwhelming. Pharaoh Khufu ordered its construction during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. Egyptologists had spent over a century establishing this timeline, but the object beneath it was 7 times older. That meant the Egyptians did not put it there. They could not have. Their entire civilization did not exist yet when that sphere was buried. When that limestone melted around it, when something catastrophic happened on the Giza Plateau thousands of years before the first pyramid was ever conceived, before agriculture, before writing, before recorded human history, the team started looking at everything differently. The precision of the pyramid's construction suddenly made sense. The alignment with true north, accurate to within 1/15 of a single degree. The internal shafts pointing at specific stars. The massive weight of 2 million stone blocks pressing down on that exact spot. None of it was about religion or ego or honoring the dead. This was engineering, containment engineering. The Egyptians had discovered something beneath the bedrock, something dangerous, something powerful, something they could not explain or control. And instead of trying to dig it up or destroy it, they buried it deeper. They locked it down under the heaviest structure they could possibly build. The pyramid was not a temple, it was a lid. Evidence supported this everywhere the team looked. The underground chamber, previously thought to be unfinished, now appeared intentional. It was positioned directly above the sphere. The descending passage led straight down toward it, then stopped, as if the builders knew exactly how close they could safely go. The Grand Gallery, with its towering corbelled ceiling, was not decorative. Its angle and position funneled energy downward through the bedrock. The so-called King's Chamber, with its granite walls and empty sarcophagus, was not a burial room. It was a counterweight, a pressure point, part of a system designed to keep something compressed beneath millions of tons of stone. Ancient texts suddenly seemed less mythological, stories of older worlds and things found in the earth that should not be disturbed. The Egyptians had not written much about why they built the pyramid. Maybe that silence was intentional. Maybe some secrets are too dangerous to record. Why it was sealed. The rock around the sphere told a story, a violent one. A story written in melted stone and shattered bedrock that scientists were only now learning to read. Geologists identified 3 distinct layers of damage. The innermost layer showed the most extreme heat exposure, temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn limestone into glass, hot enough to vaporize water instantly, hot enough to melt metal. That damage was the oldest, dating back 32,000 years to an event no human witnessed. The second layer showed fracturing, cracks radiating outward in a perfect pattern, like an explosion frozen in stone. The force required would have shattered bedrock for hundreds of feet in every direction. Seismic analysis suggested an energy release equivalent to several tons of explosives detonating simultaneously. This damage was slightly newer, approximately 28,000 years old. The third layer was different. It showed signs of deliberate human intervention, tool marks, carved channels, evidence of construction, limestone blocks positioned intentionally. This layer was Egyptian, 4,500 years old, right when the pyramid was built. The pattern was clear. Something had gone wrong with the sphere, twice. First, 32,000 years ago, there was an energy release, massive heat, the kind that melts rock and turns sand into glass. Whatever the sphere was, it had activated, or failed, or been damaged. The result was catastrophic enough to leave permanent scars in solid rock. Then, 4,000 years later, it happened again. Another rupture, more fracturing. Less heat this time, but still dangerous, still uncontrollable, still capable of destroying anything nearby. After that second event, someone decided enough was enough. Waiting for a third catastrophe was not an option. The sphere could not be moved. It was too large, too deep, too integrated into the bedrock. Destroying it was not an option either. Nobody knew what would happen if they tried. Breaking it might trigger exactly what they feared. So they built the pyramid. The alignment was crucial. True north was not symbolic. Earth's magnetic field runs north to south. The pyramid's orientation locked it into that field. The structure acted like a stabilizer, a way to ground the sphere's energy into the planet's natural electromagnetic system, instead of letting it build up and explode again. The internal chambers were not random. They formed a pathway. Energy moving up from the sphere would hit the subterranean chamber first, then the Queen's Chamber, then the Grand Gallery, then the King's Chamber, each level designed to absorb, redirect, and dissipate force. The pyramid's massive weight pressed down on the sphere constantly. 2 million blocks of limestone, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons. All of that pressure focused on one point deep underground, keeping it compressed, keeping it stable, keeping it from ever releasing its energy again. It was a cage made of geometry and stone, and it had worked perfectly for 4,500 years. The room that is still active. The problem started small, easy to dismiss. A laptop would not sync its time correctly. A radio would pick up static that followed a rhythm. 11 seconds of noise, silence. Then 11 more seconds. Always the same pattern. Then the problems got bigger, harder to ignore. Instruments inside the pyramid's lower chambers began showing strange readings. Compasses spun slowly in circles instead of pointing north. Electromagnetic sensors spiked without explanation. Cameras developed dead pixels in identical patterns across different devices. Equipment would work perfectly outside the pyramid, then fail the moment it was brought within 50 feet of the descending passage. One researcher noticed her watch running backwards for exactly 11 seconds, then forward again. She thought it was broken. Then it happened to 3 other people. Another scientist saw his phone's battery drain from full to empty in minutes, then recharge itself without being plugged in. The percentage would drop to 0, then jump back to 100%. The sphere was not just pulsing anymore, it was synchronizing. Anything electronic brought near the pyramid began matching its rhythm. Devices were locking onto the 11-second cycle, like radios tuning to a broadcast. Some pulled energy from it, others fed energy into it. The sphere was creating a field, an active, adaptive field that responded to technology in ways that should not be possible. The team brought in shielded equipment, military-grade sensors designed to resist electromagnetic interference. They failed too. Within hours, they were pulsing in sync with everything else. The shielding made no difference. Whatever signal the sphere was producing, it passed through metal, plastic, and concrete like they were not even there. Then the signal changed. For 4 weeks, the pulse had been perfectly consistent, 11.3 seconds, never varying by even a fraction. But on the 19th day after discovery, it shifted. The interval dropped to 10.9 seconds, just for 3 hours. Then it returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Nobody had touched anything. Nobody had activated new equipment. The change came from inside, from the sphere itself. It happened again 5 days later. This time, the pulse slowed to 11.8 seconds, then back to normal. Then, a week after that, it sped up to 10.1 seconds for an entire afternoon. The sphere was experimenting, testing, and learning. Scientists realized they were watching something test its environment. It was measuring responses, learning what happened when it changed frequency, seeing how the world above reacted, like a prisoner testing the bars of its cage. International authorities were notified. Meetings were held in closed rooms in Geneva, Washington, and Cairo. The decision came quickly and unanimously. All excavation stopped immediately. All sensor equipment was removed. The area was restricted. No more scans, no more tests, no more interaction with whatever was down there. Because the final question had no good answer. If the sphere was a power source, why did it pulse like a heartbeat? If it was a planetary stabilizer, why did it adapt and learn? And if it was something else entirely, something the Egyptians found and feared enough to bury under millions of tons of stone, then why was it still active after 30,000 years? Why was it waking up now? And what would happen if it ever decided to stop waiting and finally break free? If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.